All right, John, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Thanks for meeting up. It's good to meet with you.
Yeah. So, where are you from?
Originally from Hawaii. So my father's from Hawaii, and me and my siblings grew up there. Dad met mom. She's originally from Michigan, and she was being a substitute teacher, doing a teaching thing in Australia, 50 years ago or something.
Oh, okay.
Stopped over in Hawaii and met my dad, strong, conservative, a Christian background at a Baptist church. And she stayed and they had us. So, yeah, my son's name is actually a Portuguese name. It comes from my father's side, Portuguese immigrants to Hawaii. And yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. So, is it the main island then? Or?
Yeah, Oahu.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
And so now most of the family has moved to the mainland, usually most of us the West Coast, one in Tennessee. And yeah, so I have a connection to the West Coast, but it's I miss it. I'm going back actually this month, March, for a couple weeks. My first time back in 11 years, I think.
Yeah.
So excited about it. Yeah.
Sweet. And then, so did you grow up with siblings? Parents stayed together, the whole deal?
Yep. So sister, brother, all on the West Coast now. And then I made it to the Portland area because a couple family members moved here just for a business like 50 years ago, and then slowly, family started migrating to Portland. And so I like Portland. I definitely don't love Portland. It's the city I live in. Moved here for family. Pros and cons to anywhere. Mainland is cheaper than Hawaii, so that's good. Definitely. But and I like the cold, so I had no idea about that myself growing up. But then I joined in 2007, I made a very strange choice, not common in Hawaii, very low military entrance rates. But I joined the military.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, I really like the cold and like winters and my God, I love the seasons, Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, did you join the military right out of high school then? Or?
No, it's funny because birth order has such a big importance to everything, right? So my sister and my parents were able to afford private school for both of us. Younger brother got a little shafted. They just didn't have the money to send him. So I got to go to a private school. It was a decent education in Hawaii. Hawaii has back then at least, some of the worst public schools in the country. And so I got to go to public school for 1 year, and then I got to go back. And I went to college for a little bit. And that's its own kind of funny story because I got straight C's the first semester in college. Then the second semester, I totally turned it around and I got straight A's because I was like, my parents are paying. I don't have to be here just like high school. I'm going to take classes that interest me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I started getting good grades. And so but after about 2 years, 2.5 semesters, I didn't have a specific focus on. I was like, this interests me, mostly the physical sciences, some of the social sciences like psychology. And I was like, I'm just going to leave college and work for a little while. I know I'll go back. And then I worked for a little bit. I met an elderly gentleman, African-American guy who was a pilot in the U.S. Air Force. And that was kind of my first way of thinking, maybe I could do a few years in the military. And so I worked for about 1.5 years at a garage door company, and I was like, I think I'm gonna join the military. And then I made this like life decision while going to visit my family on the West Coast. Like I went to California, saw some family, took the Amtrak train as an experience up to Portland, Oregon, and I was like, yeah, I want to join the military. So I was 23 when I joined, which is pretty old for like relative to joining the enlisted side of the military, and. Yeah, I had a great 4 years in the Air Force.
Oh, in the Air Force?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So where did you kind of end up after that 4 years, and what was leaving like?
Yeah. I joined the Air Force. Fortunately, the gentleman that I met was an Air Force, former pilot. So I kind of knew, Air Force, you get treated a little better. It's like a better deal. And fortunately, I had good scores on the ASVAB and all those things. I didn't have a degree, so I went to the enlisted side. And, like pretty much everybody who goes in and gets a aviation enlisted aviator position on an aircraft, most of us choose Japan or Alaska as our first choice. Yeah. And almost nobody gets to go there. So I went to Middle Georgia, about an hour south of Atlanta, Georgia, Macon, Warner Robins Airfield. It was a good aircraft, good base, but yeah, it was not, nothing against Georgia, nothing against the South, of course, because I would have nothing against the South. Was not my pick to go to Georgia, but yeah, I was stationed there for the whole time. Although I wasn't physically there for 4 years, I was probably there for about 2 years between enlistments and things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, right on. So what was like your position specifically?
I joined. So this guy that I knew, Earl, was a pilot, and I didn't have my degree, couldn't go in as a pilot. So I put the way that the military does it is you kind of, at least the Air Force, you rank the jobs that you might want, and he said, got to try to get an aviation position. So I put some enlisted aviator positions. So if you think of a aircraft, there might be a smaller aircraft with only 3, 4, 5 crew members. There might be some of the larger aircraft like AWACS, very well known, with this little black and white radome on top of the airplane.
Oh, yeah.
That has, 15 to 20, 25 crew members or something on it. So he advised me, and just looking online, try to get an aviation position. Those are the best jobs. And so I did. And the position that I ended up taking was enlisted aviator. It was surveillance. I think it was 1 Alpha 4. So I've been like this computer tech geek all my life. And indeed, when I was in the Air Force, I was a computer tech geek on an aircraft, on the back of the plane, like doing surveillance. So it was a very good job. That first aircraft was kind of boring, and not, I don't know, just, I don't want civilians to take this the wrong way, but that aircraft was really important for military, for a mission, if there were like North and South Korea like attacking each other, like serious big battles. Well, I joined in 07. I flew over Iraq and Afghanistan in 08, 09, and then I was in Afghanistan with a different aircraft. Those battles, this aircraft was meant for like old style wars, and so like it's kind of a boring mission, I guess. See how big this video gets, but like some of the military brass in that area might get really pissed at me for saying this, but this aircraft that I served on is not the most necessary for the military to have. And most of us knew that. But when you're the base commander or the top brass, you want to keep your job and your career made in this. So that sort of thing happens everywhere, right? It happens at big companies, it happens in the government. But I volunteered for a smaller, different aircraft, the MC-12, and so I was able to serve on that. 4 people, very small plane, no bathroom, pee in a thing, and if you got to poop, well, figure it out,
Yeah.
And that is the aircraft that I was stationed and serving in Afghanistan for about 6 months. I was relatively safe on a good Air Force base, good food and things. But that was a really fantastic mission, very interesting, good people. Had a couple missions at night where some people got killed and things. And so those 2 aircraft kind of completed my 4 years. And I'm proud that I went in, served, and did that. And I think I made the right choice to get out,
Yeah.
It's always a tough decision. Do I want to stay in 20 years, get all these great retirement benefits and things, or get out? I don't understand the people who make it up to the halfway mark of doing like 10 years in the military and then get out, because it's like, wow, that's such a hard decision, So I had a good time. I got out, saved some money, and then I moved to Arizona I finished my bachelor's in the Air Force when I was on active duty, usually deployed. And I've always been much more interested in the physical sciences, biology, astronomy, geology, physics a little bit, but the math is a little too complicated for me. But always more interested in the physical sciences. But when I was finishing my bachelor's, there just weren't a lot of options for remote physicals, for a virtual, remote distance learning bachelor's. So I got my bachelor's in security management with a military-friendly thing. And then when I was getting out, I was like, I want to get my master's, but I really want to do it in person. This is 2011, so long before COVID and everything virtual. And so I went, there's a very veteran-friendly school, University of Arizona. So I went there for 2 years and got my master's in biology. Yeah, it's a good deal. And then that's when I started traveling South America, because I still had some savings, and you and I were talking about Spanish and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, right on. And then so you spent a good amount of time in South America then, yeah.
Yeah, I spent like a year and a half. I went down there first just because the flight was cheapest, I think, to Lima, Peru. And then I started in Peru, spent like a month there, saw Machu Picchu and stuff. And then I saw a little bit of Ecuador, and then Colombia. And that's where I met a wonderful woman, got engaged, got married. And we have a wonderful, now 5-year-old together. And so, I said his age. I don't know if I'll regret that. And I said it's a he. But yeah, so I went to Colombia, stayed there for a little bit, and then we moved here. So my Spanish was getting better all the time. And we lived in New York City for about a year and a half. And most of this was possible because of what I did for this year after the military. I knew I wanted to go learn more about biology because I love the sciences. And I asked other people what they did when they were getting out. This could be a good segue to like campaign talking.
Yeah.
But a lot of them were doing this military contractor thing. And I was like, oh, okay. And how much does that pay? And it pays a lot of money. So I was like, maybe I can pause the degree for 6 to 12 months and save some money as a contractor. And I mean, this discussion can get like an hour just on military contracting and the industrial defense military industry, because there's so much corruption there in DC, and there's so much, it's just, I don't know, this could be its own, obviously, hour.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate to save some money, getting paid very handsomely in Afghanistan to do that as a civilian. And the people who I worked with who knew that I was leaving to get a master's were like, you freaking nuts? Like, do this for 2, 3, 4 years and you retire and then go get your whatever. And I was like, it's a good job. It pays really wonderfully, but I love biology. I want to study this and go more. And so, so I transitioned I got my master's and went to South America. And because of that savings and some investments, we were able to afford living in Manhattan for about a year and a half. And then we didn't want to have our son in New York City. And so we moved out to Portland. We have a lot of family out here. And so he was born here, came out, she was about 7 months pregnant. He was born here. And now he just started school a year and a half ago, and we're getting set up, and it's decent out here.
Yeah. Portland's interesting. It's kind of become a cultural topic starting in 2020 in the debates when like Trump and was talking about Portland a lot.
Yeah, I feel like, and there's a million topics you can get me where I just don't have the, I don't read or watch the news a lot. I try to stay with understanding things of the long-term trend of the country. And I think that ties in with running for president, because you don't, the president has to get a daily briefing of stuff, what's going on, but you don't want the president doing what Trump did. He's just like, yeah, watching the news, what's on, no, I want my president to be long-term thinking,
Totally.
If there's a big, a surprise riot in Los Angeles, like, yeah, the president needs to know about that within a couple hours. But like the staff will tell him or her when we have female presidents, but president doesn't need to be watching the news all day. Like,
probably not. No.
So, I don't know. I wouldn't even need TVs really in the White House, but that's its own thing. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So being in Portland, kind of it becoming a cultural sensitive subject, especially during the pandemic when the George Floyd protests started. What was your experience with that like? Because, that was being talked about on Fox News a lot.
Yeah. So I guess what I was getting at is because of having about an 18-month-old then and being kind of locked down, like we were sort of like, coming out of this sleep-deprived phase. Yeah. Like I would say the first when you have a baby, the first 9 to 18, maybe 9 to 24 months is like that sleep deprived phase. And it's like, I don't know what's going on. I do remember some neighbors who did not have a kid. They ended up having a kid 2 years after us, going to protests like that. And I remember going to a protest downtown here in Portland. I remember thinking, okay, if one of us wants to go to one of these protests to support it, that's okay. I would, and so this is me as a new father thinking, not a lot of sleep, with like a 12 to 18-month-old, right? At that time, I was like, but we should not both go with him. I don't think we should ever take a young child to a protest. It just, to most protests. And so I remember thinking, and I don't know if this is a long-term opinion that I'm fully like, really strong on politically, but it's a weak opinion that I don't think anyone going to a protest should take their young kids, because it's sort of like why kids can't vote. It's like, the kid doesn't have a say in like going to this, and you can tell a kid, yeah, we're going to support this thing in a protest, but the kid is not really making their own decision for that. And then especially if the protest has any chance of getting violent, I would say, no, don't take the kid. Or like, you better be 3 blocks away from any, because it's a kid there.
Definitely.
So I didn't go to any protests myself, and I was a little bit more disconnected and unaware of what everything was going on, just because of having a new child. And one thing I can say, I mean, I'll just jump from your question to the biggest thing that I really support politically. And I only saw really Marianne Williamson talk about this 4 years ago in the Democratic debates, which is that this country really needs to think about reparations, And it's not just reparations for African Americans, although that should be the primary focus. It should be consider reparations for Native Americans, for the Native Americans who are still alive, because most are not alive because of what happened with the founding of the country and spreading to the West, And so I guess I'm not so much, I don't want to say the word detached, people might throw it against me, but not as much aware of the exact specifics that were going on from the Black Lives Matter protests, but I agree with the underlying sense of it. And I think we need a president who's kind of coming from the outside, especially outside of DC, and in my case, outside of this continent, right? I'm not from North America. My father's not from North America. Our side, that side of the family is from Hawaii, from Portugal, immigrants and stuff. To come in and say, look, yes, no one alive today was a slave, but this country has not really dealt with the end of slavery on a morality, ethical level, and we need to, and I'm not saying we pay every slave descendant $100,000 or whatever it is. I don't know what the numbers could be. The federal government's not doing that great financially. They can't even pass their own freaking budget, right? But it's a morality, it's an ethics thing. This article, The Case for Reparations, it's just fantastic, because it's like, you can't, if our country wants to move from like relatively young, right, 2.5 centuries, give or take, to a more mature long-term country, we have to like deal with our origins. We can't just say like, oh, we're not going to talk about, reparations, that's crazy, and that's the biggest thing of running for president, is the core of the platform is, I want to go to Congress and say, you guys are not doing your job. And Congress is not doing its job because we, the people, are not doing our job. We're not having these conversations, right? We walk away from discomfort. We walk away from what's a little scary. And it's okay to walk away if tensions get high and people start arguing, but then come back to the conversation, So we can say there's 1,000 things more important or more pressing for Congress to talk about than, constitutional amendment on term limits, or constitutional amendment finally talking about reparations, or age limits, or an amendment on abortion. But actually, I don't think there's anything more important for Congress to be doing. You know, I think the day-to-day, the week-to-week stuff that Congress does is really just, if I can say it, it's masturbating. It's just Congress feeling good about itself, you know? Yeah.
The pandemic, how, aside from, kind of being a new father and all sorts of stuff, how was the pandemic for you? I know a lot of people got caught up in politics during that time. Were you a lot more involved in the news, or did you have any? How were you impacted?
Yeah, I mean, we were still. I was still out of the news. I mean, I was looking for work. I started looking for work early in the pandemic. We moved here. You know, we were still living off savings, which is survivable, and it was nice to like, okay, we can, survive with all the savings I have. We could still survive 18 months if I didn't have a job, but so I've been fortunate that and that's one of the biggest things I want to say is, I've always been fortunate enough that I've never lived paycheck to paycheck, and that's an incredible fortune, because I know so many Americans are doing that, and I've been, I don't want to say lucky, but I've worked and I've been able to save, but when you have a new child, it's like, oh crap, we could survive this year with no income, just on savings, but that's not a good trajectory for next year when the savings are going to run out. Like, we got family here. If we had to move in, worst case. So I started looking for work, and then this freaking pandemic thing happened. It was like, my skills maybe are not as relevant to the workforce. And so I found this programming boot camp that I did virtually. And that was good because I've always been a computer geek, but I never had any like actual coding, programming skills. Oh. So, it was focused on Python and stuff. And another benefit, just like pitch for young people joining the military, if you've never thought about it, it was veteran funded under a new post-Obama. And then I think even, I don't think it had anything to do with the president. Like, Congress approved it. And then under the pandemic, Congress continued it. But there was a lot of corruption under this program because like private schools popping up to just like, get government money. So I took that and then I started working at a tech company. But we're here in a pretty good neighborhood of Portland, Oregon. It's modest 2 bedrooms, certainly not super rich, wealthy, but we rent here. I couldn't afford to buy here because it's so, neighborhood's expensive. But I say that as context that, the pandemic wasn't as terrible for us as it maybe was for some. It was a shitty thing. One of the first things I read, I love to read hundreds of books in a year if I had the time. But early on in the pandemic, after about 2 months, I knew I wanted to read about the 1918 flu pandemic. I'd heard about it, looked it up on Wikipedia. I'm like, I need to read some books on this. And so I read those books, and that gave me, in probably May, June of 2020, the context of, oh my gosh, like, this is going to be years, and maybe the mask won't be so strict for all these years, but like, this is going to be the arc, the trajectory that's coming. Happened in 1918, and it took years. And the science in 1918, I don't even think they knew about viruses then. I think they thought that the 1918 flu pandemic was caused by the flu bacteria. There is no flu bacteria; it's a virus. We know that now, but they didn't know about viruses, if my memory serves me right. So those books helped me kind of think, oh, this is a long-term thing and it's going to change everything. And then later in 2020 is when I thought, okay, well, my skills are kind of dated. I'm going to get more tech skills and things. And then I got hired. And because of the biology background and the love for science, especially the physical sciences and evidence and wanting to prove things, I like supported vaccination from early on. I wanted my parents are in their 70s, wanted them to get vaccinated. And I want to like balance this, because I'm not like like, you better get vaccinated, otherwise, like, I'm not going to speak to you again.
Right.
Kind of
People
person,
have
you
that
know,
kind of
like,
freedom to.
yeah, like, especially with that, like, the easiest thing is to be honest. I don't always get my annual flu shot, right?
Totally.
Now with COVID, I got a booster, and then I don't think I've had a COVID booster for over a year. So it's like, you're not like a damned, condemned, terrible person if you don't always get like, but in general, the concept of vaccines is ridiculously sound. Like, in the camera straight, I hope like people didn't click off, any super far out people, but the concept of vaccines is incredibly strong and well supported, which is why we don't have measles and mumps and stuff going around. And it's why our kids aren't dropping like flies, because they get their vaccinations. To balance it out, like when our son was born, I wanted to delay some of the vaccines. And like, he was born and then he freaking just at home. He's not going swap and spit. He wasn't in daycare. So like, let's not do the newborn ones at newborn. Let's do the newborn ones at 1 month. No one saw him, all this
Right,
stuff.
yeah.
So to give that context, some background in biology, very supportive of vaccines. But as I mentioned, from Hawaii, my parents were pretty conservative Christians. And so, politically, they could talk left, right, certain things. My dad, they live out in the suburbs, and my dad supported, as a Christian, programs to help homelessness and things here. And he supported donating to his church, and he wanted his church to help those in poverty and things. But if you go back to like, when I was in South America in 2016, my fiance from South America was really concerned about some of the rhetoric of this guy running for a Republican nomination for president, right? And I watched him, and I'm like, man, this guy's really like just obvious at his like racist remarks, and not even as deep, with Trump, it's deeper than racism. It was just, he hates everyone who is not Trump, right? He probably hates his own kids. I mean, he hates everyone who does not think exactly like him in that current moment. He hates himself a week ago, so she was really concerned about some of the rhetoric from this candidate, Trump in 2015, 2016. And I called my dad from South America, and I tried to have a conversation, Dad, you're long-term, like almost lifelong Republican, but you also are a Christian, and you care about morality and ethics. This guy Trump, like, he's not going to win your nomination, right? He's a terrible, unethical person. He doesn't give a damn about anybody. He doesn't give a damn about the Republican Party, much less Americans. I mean, this guy doesn't care about anything. He's an anarchist. He's a authoritarian. And my dad was like, before the nominations, he was like, oh yeah, he'll never win. I was like, okay, thank God, because, And my dad didn't support him, as most Christians with a sense of morality did not support Donald Trump in 2016. And then he won, and they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like, well, damn, we don't want Hillary Clinton, so I guess we got to support Donald Trump. And they did, and the Democratic side of things, Democrats got cocky. They thought they had the election in their pocket, and Trump won. And so my dad, like many others, fell into supporting someone and like, just, brush his lack of ethics and all his corruption and everything under the side, whatever, we got to support him. And so my dad your question is about the pandemic. My dad got too far into the kind of like nut job territory of, anti-vaxxers and like all these conspiracy theories online, and just up late at night watching the worst stuff on YouTube where they put the scary music to get everything going. And he chose not to get vaccinated. And everyone of our family knew, as our son was walking more and more as the years went, my father was walking less and less. And he was overweight, and his lung capacity was like, you take a walk around the block 2 blocks with him, and he'd be huffing and puffing. And this is at sea level, not including going up to Mount Hood or anything. And so I scheduled them to get vaccinated at the Oregon Convention Center. My dad was kind of resistant. They're in their 70s, so they had the slots open to get some of the first vaccines. And I was like, Dad, please get vaccinated. Please, like, you're not healthy to begin with. You're going to get sick if you get COVID. If you have the vaccine, at least it'll help, And so he's like, well, I need some time to think about it. Can you schedule it for 2 weeks out or something? So I was literally on there, putting their information in and scheduling them. I'm like, the calendar goes out to 10 days, So I scheduled it for him, and then as the days got closer, 2-3 days prior, he's like, we're not gonna do it. We're not gonna get vaccinated. I'm like, Dad, come on. So they didn't get vaccinated, and they didn't get COVID until I think that was early 2021 that the vaccine started rolling out, if I recall correctly. And then he got COVID in, February 13th, Super Bowl 2022, day before Valentine's Day, that Monday. I remember because we saw him on the 12th. If you remember, if you were in Portland, we had one of our like February warm waves where it was bright and sunny in mid-February, breaking the rain and the cold, and the temperatures, gets up to 70, and everybody flocks outside. And so my parents did some babysitting for our son, and then we went to the Portland Winter Lights Festival, and we were going to go back the next day to get to spend the Super Bowl with him. And he said, I've got a little bit of a cough. I don't think you should come over. And I was like, oh, Dad, anti-vaxxers if you remember, were taking more COVID tests, right? Because a lot of us as families were like, some people were like, you're not coming to my Thanksgiving celebration. You haven't had the vaccine.
Right.
And I disagree with that kind of like excluding your family. So I would tended towards like, well, you better wear a mask or you better be more strict. Take a COVID test and wear a mask, like whatever. But let the family come to your Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
So I knew he was taking more COVID tests frequently. And this is, mid-February. And I was like, well, when's the last time you did a COVID test? He was like, oh, it was before Christmas, before the Christmas gathering. And I was like, okay, you mind taking one? And so he took one. And, I was like, okay, I'll call you back. That was probably like the most nervous 15-minute wait time of my life. I was like, oh my God, Dad. I'm sitting here in my house waiting for him to call me back, positive or negative. And it's 15 minutes have gone by, and I'm like, okay, wait. 15 minutes clock didn't start until he opened the test and did the swab. Okay, maybe it'd take 25 minutes. God damn, like, do you have COVID or not? He called back, he had COVID. And so I asked him to take a second test. He did. And anyway, we thought he was going to recover. And, long story short, he spent his birthday, his 75th birthday, in bed in his house in the suburbs with COVID. And he went into the ICU, 17th, 24th, a week later. And he was in the ICU, and me and my siblings, we were kind of in denial. We were still thinking that he would recover. Even my mom was thinking that he would recover. He was in the ICU about 2 days when me and my siblings had a conversation with the doctor. And that's when we were like, oh, doctor sounds more serious than we were kind of like led on to believe. And he passed away the next morning. Late February 2022. And he wasn't healthy to begin with, but can't say for certain the vaccine would have prevented that specific death or any specific death, but in general in the population, the vaccine would have prevented a lot of those senior deaths. But the sad thing to me, because I accepted his death after a couple weeks, months or so, he was in his 70s, so I'm grateful that we moved out here and I got to spend time with them. The sad thing is that not getting vaccinated in the pandemic became almost kind of a rite of passage for some Republicans, for some people on the political right. We've politicized almost everything in this country, And if you look deeper at Americans, as as I think most people know, talking to one another, we're not red and blue. We're not Democrat and Republican. We're so much more deeper than that. We have these national elections every 4 years for president, and we only see ourselves voting red and blue, right? But actually, most Americans are mostly toward the center, and like I lean a little more left on this, a little more right on that, blah blah blah. So that's the sad thing about that. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry to hear about that.
Thanks. Yeah. It's a door. I know people who never got to know their parents because their parents died very young, or their kids have divorced, or there's a military family or whatever. And my dad died at 75. I was 36 or 37. So I got most of my time with him.
Yeah.
And that's good. He got to know his grandson and his other grandkids. So
yeah, fortunate in the grand scheme of things. But, yeah. So to transition things, let's get into it. So you decided to run for president.
Yeah.
And what initially spurred that thought? Like, is it something you've thought about your whole life? Is it something that came to you in a moment of inspiration? What was sort of the genesis of deciding to take on such a bold endeavor?
Yeah, it was kind of a moment of inspiration. It's a combination of a moment of inspiration along with being so against Donald Trump and what he stands for. I don't know what he stands for. I don't think he knows what he stands for because I don't think he stands for anything, right? He's an authoritarian. I hope there's some Republicans watching this who are like, you don't know what he's an authoritarian. He doesn't know what he stands for. And when he's called on his own BS, he just excludes those people from his cabinet or, whatever. I was never registered with a political party before 2017 when we moved to New York City. And when you move there and when you get your driver's license in New York State, I like the way they have it set up when you get your driver's license. Do you want to register to vote? Yeah, obviously, and that's pretty good because I think you should be automatically registered to vote. Maybe it should be compulsory. I don't know, whatever. But it's like, do you want to register as a political party so you can vote in their primaries? And it's like, okay. So I'm jumping ahead from two stories, but the shorter story is we moved to New York State, got our license. Well, if that guy represents the Republican Party, I have some views that lean towards the right, but I sure as hell am not part of that guy's party. So I'm going to register as a Democrat in New York State. And so I did. And I started getting more involved, and I would get the ballots. In New York State, wouldn't get a ballot because they don't mail-in voting, but I would start to vote in the primaries more. Moved out to Oregon. Oregon, we seem to get a ballot to vote like 3 times a year. It's like, holy crap, between primaries and special elections, is like, it's kind of overwhelming how much, I don't want to have to vote on like the large or the jumbo size toilet paper that city buildings have to decide between, I don't know. So, help me, losing my train of thought.
Just deciding that you wanted to run for president, where that kind of inspiration came from.
So I was so disappointed in 2016 in those candidates. Democrats don't like to hear stuff about their candidate, but Hillary Clinton lived in the White House as the first lady for 8 freaking years in the 90s. She's served as Secretary of State. She's had political power in DC for like decades. She's the one that they chose to run for the Democratic nomination for president. Like, that seems to me like she's an extremely egotistical, power-hungry woman. And that is what I saw in 2016 from the Democratic Party. Yeah, we've got this cat in the bag. We'll definitely get our nominee in. Let's just pick Hillary Clinton because she's a female, and we got the first black president. Yeah, let's get the first female president. Yeah, we got it down. Boom. No, you lost to Trump, in 2016 because you got cocky. And so I was so against both of those candidates. And I might get shit for this. I might even get people like trying to kill me, but I voted for a third party. I was like, I can't do this. I know that my vote for a third party might get Trump elected, but I can't in good conscience vote for one of those. But I took it with, and that's why I'm running, I took it with a level of personal responsibility. Like, why did those two parties have shitty candidates? Because I didn't vote in their primaries, right? I had a good excuse that year. I was physically out of the country. I would have had to register in Oregon, mail-in voting, all this stuff. But that's an excuse. I could have voted in the primaries, and I didn't. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to register as a political party. If Donald Trump represents the Republicans, I sure as hell am not a Republican. I'm going to register as a Democrat. And so those were the kinds of decisions I made to be more aware of it in the weeks after his election before inauguration. So the story of when I thought that I would run, me and my then fiance were moving from, we just came in the country, she just seen the country, and we're here in Oregon. And I knew I was kind of interested in having a family, living in Oregon long term, but we wanted to live in New York. So we literally took my little car, my little Toyota Yaris, whose trunk I really miss because you get bigger furniture in there. And we drove across the country. And if you remember, Portland had some pretty big winter storms, 2016, 2017. That winter.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Shut this city down. Well, we were tourists, so that was fun as hell. We didn't care, snow, trekking around. Definitely not easy for people in the city trying to go about that.
Yeah.
But we started driving across the country. We drove to Salt Lake City, Utah. Drove through Colorado. And we drove over the Rockies the day of the inauguration, of Trump's 2017 inauguration. And you just feel this tension in the country, of oh my gosh, what have we done? Who have we elected? What is this guy going to do? And I'm sure some people were proud and they were super. The destructive anarchist teenage boy in many of us, especially men, those people were excited, right? Those are the people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. Mm-hmm. I think those people were excited. Yeah, Trump said he's going to drain the swamp and get everything different. No, I don't think Trump had a freaking clue what he was going to do. And I think he's trapped into, the presidency. But anyway, January 20th or 2020 or 21st, after the inauguration, before we were getting ready to drive to the next place in Colorado, I was like, hey, I want to do some exercise. I want to go for a run. And I went on a run, and not a long run, 10, 20 minutes. And the thought came to me, hey, I'm so against not only Trump, but these candidates and these parties and this freaking system of, either shitty presidents in my life or kind of mediocre presidents that get locked into red versus blue, and they can only really serve their political party when they're in. I'm so against this. Could I run for president? And I'm on this run. I'm like, I think you only need to be American born and 30 or 35 or some age limit. And so I started thinking about it, and I'm like, I'll double check the Constitution when I get back from the run. Well, I'm not that bad of a candidate. I mean, I was in the military, I'm from Hawaii, I've lived in all these states, got a couple degrees, I like to listen to people and talk to people. If you show me that I'm wrong, I'm very strong in my opinions, but if you show me that I'm wrong, okay, I was wrong. I'll change my mind day to day, week to week. I'd be a decent candidate. I should run. I should think about running. And so I got back and I told my fiance, who's from overseas, and she was like, John, I love you. I support you. Don't you need to be rich or famous or a politician? And so, and I'm like, I looked at her, I'm like, well, let's look at the Constitution. No, you only have to be 35. And so you don't have to be rich. You do need money to run a campaign. I need money. Please donate. This campaign is, very underfunded. Please, it's going to be the $5 to $10, $20 donations that make it work. So please donate. But you don't have to be rich. You don't have to be a politician, which is nice because I don't want a lifelong politician serving in this job. I want someone kind of from the outside. You don't have to be famous when you start running. You have to be famous to win the election, right? Can't win the election if you're not famous. And so I thought about it. And in 2017, 2018, I kind of brainstormed some long-term ideas for it. And in 2019, when the Democratic primaries were starting up in the debates, I gave one quick exploratory speech at a library to family and friends here. Only a couple people showed up, and I was like, I don't think I'm ready to do this yet. This is nice. But so I tuned in really acutely to the Democratic primaries. It's like I watched almost every hour of those Democratic primary debates, and I was like, Kamala Harris and Biden were like my 19th, 20th choices out of all of those. It was like Pete Buttigieg, Cory Booker. Those are probably my top two. I thought Marianne Williamson had some interesting ideas, but it's like, I don't know, you're going to beat Trump, and then Biden is the nominee. I'm like, oh, man. So I voted for Biden. I didn't want the other guy. Don't like the other guy. I don't want him back. But last year, as 2023 started going on, I was like, the title of your show is exactly why I'm running. It's would I rather push this back another 4 years, or would I rather give it my all, put in at least, most of my savings, and just, if I fail this year, I fail. But I want to do it. I want to do it while my son or other kids are still young and not old. And I'd rather just campaign on everything that I believe in and fail and get it out there. And then, if people tell me, if I have some local position, a local elected official position in 4 years or 10 years, and people say, you should run for president. Nah, I gave it my all. The country wasn't interested in the things I'm trying to do. The country didn't want an outsider coming in. I don't want the Republicans or the Democrats to control the presidency anymore. I don't know if I necessarily want to end political parties, to end these two big political parties, but I'd absolutely want to end the political parties' control over the presidency. I think, these political parties, they serve their purpose in Congress maybe, but the president should be a little bit of everybody, A little bit wacko, a little bit right, a little bit left, a little bit, no, I said this, authority, a little bit back, oh, okay, yeah, I was wrong, a little bit of everything, a little bit of all of us.
Yeah, I like that. I think that a president should be more reflective of the people, and as someone who's understanding and empathetic. And certainly these days it feels like we're kind of stuck in this culture war where we don't even necessarily know what the platform is for Trump in this upcoming election.
Oh my God.
Neither for Biden.
Yeah.
It's more, I'm not that guy, so vote for me.
Yeah.
So would you say that your campaign moving forward is about, what is it about? Is it about ideas? Is it about not being that guy? What is it about?
Well, first of all, it's, we're doing this in March 2024. I'm still registered as a Democrat. It's pretty obvious. I'm an independent-minded thinker, right? I have been most of my life. I lean more left politically on most issues. Some issues I lean to the right. But I am doing this still in the Democratic Party against President Biden, who I voted for. I think I don't genuinely believe he wants to do this job 4 more years. I think he thinks that he can do it because the people around him are telling him to do it. And I am running against him because I think that if people see what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to win the Democratic nomination, which I've already lost, right? Because I'm not on the ballots in those states. Super Tuesdays, right? The day this comes out, give or take. I am making it my goal to win the Democratic nomination and then respectfully leave the party and take that as an endorsement to be in the general ballot, the general election in all 50 states as an independent. That is a very dangerous thing to try to do, but I have to believe that the country is ready for it. You look at the primary numbers in most states, and Trump is getting more primary votes in most states, which tells you Trump has a very good chance of winning this next election. If it's Trump and Biden round 2, Trump lost in 2020, Biden won. A lot of nuttiness on that. But if it's Biden and Trump round two, Trump could win. Trump has a lot of support, and most people like me who are like, Biden again? I specifically, individually, John, feel if it's Trump and Biden again, I may not cast a vote for Biden. I'm not going to vote for Trump. But we might stay out of it, people like me. And so as I talk to my campaign manager and people, I'm willing and open to all of these issues. There are so many things that we need to do federally, in Congress and everywhere. But you mentioned, culturally, there's these cultural wars. And my platform sort of is and always been these three things that I'm open to changing if people would change my mind. But every person I talk to, it's like, all your ID is important, all your ID is important. But you know what? The federal government is not working anymore. It's not working for us. How do we fix the government? I've never heard of a better idea in my life than what I heard of 20 years ago in college as a whim, just like, brainstorming. It's like, well, we're supposed to have these three branches of the federal government, right? And the most power is in the legislative. We make the laws, and the president and the executive branch executes the laws. And when there's disagreements, the judicial branch interprets the laws. We're supposed to have these three distinct branches. Why don't we have them in 3 cities and not move the president to Portland, Oregon? I just want to say that on the record. Nothing against Portland. I am not suggesting that executive branch or the White House or the president move to Portland, Oregon. I am suggesting that we take that concept and we really think about it nationally. Think about having the executive branch out of D.C., president who doesn't live in D.C., having a very small town for the Supreme Court, the justices and their infrastructure, and then Congress stays in D.C. Or Congress moves to the center-ish of the country, right? And then the executive branch, because most of the buildings and money in D.C. is the executive branch, all that stays in D.C. I don't get to decide, but that's the concept that we need to nationally talk about. I think that is the greatest idea to bring the government back to working for the people, that these three are in distinct locations. So much harder for the two parties to control the government from like the shadows and outside. So much harder for foreign powers. And then the second pillar of the platform is writing constitutional amendments. We haven't written a new one. I think it's since 1971. We have 27 amendments to the Constitution. The 26th was the most recent one we wrote that was new. We ratified one in the 90s, which is an amendment from like the 1700s. It doesn't really count because we didn't write a new one. But in 1971 or 1972, give or take, we wrote the 26th Amendment. That's the last new one we wrote. So you and I, and most of us under 50, we haven't seen a Congress that amends the Constitution, right? And like, if you read the Constitution, you look at the first 10, the Bill of Rights, we should be amending the Constitution, every decade or so, right? Like you can imagine if we were caught up to date, if we had a federal government which is really working for the people, and state governments and city governments which were really working well, we might be at the point where we need an amendment on pet rights, or we might need an amendment on AI, artificial intelligence. We might need an amendment on should you be able to post anonymously online, right? I'm really open to, we didn't evolve for anonymity in a public space. I think of the town hall, crazy guy, or you just get drunk, or I get high, or whatever. We get angry and we say some things in the town hall. Everybody knows who we are. There's no anonymity. So should I be able to post, go F yourself, or you should commit suicide online anonymously? That's something we should debate in Congress. We're so far behind from those, three ideas, AI and pets and all these things, that the federal government is playing catch up with itself with its stupid rules and procedures and hearings on things that matter, but they don't matter as much as the things that should, which is the government working for the people. And it doesn't work for the people. And we need to amend the Constitution. And I have 20 different topics on which we need to amend the Constitution. And we could probably brainstorm, you and I, like 10 additional topics. And then we get those together in Congress. start writing amendments on them, right? But the easiest two are term limits and age limits, right? I mean, we freaking need term limits. These people in Congress, I don't know if we set 3 terms or 5 terms. I don't know the number, but the people need to debate it and set it in Congress so that they can't serve for 20, 30, 40 years and be career politicians, right? That is so well supported among the American people, among all of us. Yes, we need term limits. Why don't they write that? Because they don't want to write something that limits their power, right? Of course. Age limits is very well supported, right? We should not have Trump and Biden campaigning because they're both too old. We have age minimums. We should have age maximums. That's not ageist. You and I know there are 24-year-olds who are educated enough to be president, who are connected, who are mature enough to be president. But I'm sorry, you're 24. We set the Constitution that you got to be 35. So amending the Constitution, it's the number one thing we need to do, the greatest thing we need to do, because it forces all of us to come together. You can't amend the Constitution without 2/3 a vote of the House, 2/3 a vote of the Senate. So it's an incredibly difficult process, incredibly high bar, but that's what we need to do because it spills out of Congress into our day-to-day lives at the coffee shops and at the fairs and at the parks, at Thanksgiving and talking to other parents at school pickup and drop off that, oh my gosh, you hear they're debating this constitutional amendment? Well, we better contact our representatives, It's the number one thing that brings us all to the table to get our voices heard, to reach compromise in Congress. And some people have posted online, amending the Constitution, that's so difficult. Well, it's difficult because Congress wants to make it difficult. You read the Constitution, it's just a 2/3 vote. And I guarantee people when we do the easiest two, which are term limits and age limits, the others will start the process, So I'm volunteering to be this person that brings all this life experience, this outside experience, this military ethos, a commitment to the world's religions, respect for religious culture, for ethics and morality. And I want to bring that into the White House and the presidency. And only way that I could run a good White House is by attracting excellent people to be on the cabinet, to be running the federal offices, because then they'd be running a lot of the day-to-day stuff. I would actually literally, physically want to go to Congress to do exactly what I'm doing, which is, I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a really good TED Talk. It's only 5 or 7 minutes from a guy with a British accent. And he's talking about the formation of the role of the president and the word preside from president simply means to sit before. Exactly what you and I are doing. That's like, it's not they wanted to pick, the founders wanted to pick a word that was like, how do we pick a very lowly word? Like not a king, not a superhero, not a monarch, not a dictator, like, what about preside? Preside, that's so low. That just means to sit before. Like, yeah, let's make it presider, president. And they made it that. And so, I'd be honored to be able to go to Congress and just sit before and be like, you freaking idiots, you have no idea what you're doing. Like, stop talking about all the BS of your rules and aye, yay, nay. Like, we're going to vote on this one thing, Anyway, that's not exactly how it works day to day, but.
Naturally, yeah. But it sounds like my impression is you want to sort of make the government more reflective of people, less reflective of necessarily what's popular on social media, what the culture wars are, but more reflective of, hey, these are modern issues that we need to talk about, and we need to bring these into the conversation and have our politics reflect that.
Yeah, I think most of us, the federal government moves so slow. I think most of us would say, well, it's better for experimentation in government to be at the smaller local level, right? Cities and states. But the federal government is moving so slow that we're never going to catch up at this rate. It's like, and you've traveled overseas. Anyone who's watching this who's traveled overseas knows, I hate hearing this, like, America is God. America is the greatest country in the world. It's good to be patriotic. It's good to have pride. I'm proud that I served in the military. We have a great country. But there's 200 countries, it's 187 or whatever the number is. There's no greatest country in the world, right? There's no greatest country in the world. Some cities around the world are so much more advanced than our cities, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you go to New York City, there's some really cool stuff, and the subway is excellent, and there's all this stuff. But it is a crap hole in other ways, When there's a garbage strike, oh man, it starts to stink in 2 days. And I mean, like, why do we not have a half decent rail system in the United States? And not just a rail system you get dropped off at the train station and then like your SOL, like how do you get to your final destination? Like a rail system that's connected to like, okay, and you got to deal with Uber, that gets you your final destination. And then it's walking from there, and every city has a half decent transit. Like, there's no greatest country in the world, and our country is just so far behind. But you see that in our Constitution. We should have 5, 10, 20 new amendments. And so by taking all of these issues up to the level of constitutional amendment, it forces us to think about our issues at a bigger level, right? So one thing that people think is important to them, to some younger people, is forgiveness of student loan debt, right? Well, that's incredibly important to you and to you, because you took on the student loan debt. But maybe it's not that important to all these people. So thinking about all of my issues, which of my issues that I think are important for president at the national level, if you only look for a candidate who's focused on those issues, then then why not just run yourself, Like, all of those issues are important. All of those issues are important. I'm trying to say, well, what are the issues that are most important for most of us? And then only if we get the government working can we even talk about those issues, And so, I wouldn't say that in the first year, like, dealing with reparations would be a top priority for the first year. But that is so important to who we are as a people. It's like, it's just dealing with our history. I don't understand why at the political level, talking about that idea of reparations for descendants of slaves or descendants of Native Americans is like, you hear, oh, that's political suicide. Don't talk about reparations. Like, yeah, so.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to have you back again soon, but
yeah, thanks.
To wrap things up, let's, if you have a final plea or a final message you'd like to share, what would that be?
Donate, go to the site, fialforward.com, FIAL forward.com, and donate. I really want to run this campaign with, I think I can do it for less than $100 million. My initial ballparks for $7 to $10 million were too low, because you need another 10 to 20 million for just ballot access in the States.
Wow.
So you need at least $20 to $50 million to run a campaign, and we're nowhere there. But I want to run it not with those rich political donors doing PACs and stuff. I want to run it with the $3 to $30 donations from average Americans. So please donate, and do it monthly, because doing a monthly donation gives you power. Because in a month or two, if you see something you didn't like, you see me getting too cocky, or you just like, no, he's changing the platform, I don't agree with that, it lets people pull the plug. And so if donations are rising, but then there's cliffs, it sends me a message of like, oh, why did 10% of people stop donating or whatever. But I want to run it with those kinds of donations. And if people watching this in March or April 2024, it is not too late. Biden's a nice old man, but he is old. And I think we all know, read the 25th Amendment, where the cabinet and a majority of staff can oust him. They are already planning to get him out of there the moment he wins re-election, or the moment he's inaugurated for a second term. Sorry, Joe, we all voted to get you out, and then Kamala Harris becomes vice president. And whether you love or hate Kamala Harris, or you're kind of like, pros and cons, we're not voting for Kamala Harris to be president, right? So all of these primaries in the Democratic Party right now, it's like, we might have to redo the whole thing if he changes his mind, or he dies, or they oust him this year in 2024. Yeah. So it is not too late whether it's March, April, May, you're watching this, please donate. And, you know, share with everyone you know, because this is important, you know. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, John.
All right.
I'll end it there.
Yeah. How'd you do on the time?
Oh.
I saw you looking like, oh man.
Oh, pretty good. Yeah.